Next week. Everybody say next week. Free Kona ice. Thumbs up, right? And s'mores. Couldn't get much better than that. Anybody know where s'mores started? How it started? I'm just the weird kind of nerd that would go look that up. So I have this kind of a curious mind, and whenever I come across something, I was like, I wonder how that got started. Or when I hear about something that works well or some product that's really cool, I always go and check. And so I researched it out, and the general consensus is that nobody's really sure exactly where it got started, but the recipe for s'mores actually appeared for the first time in 1927 in a Girl Scouts guide, which also had listed 12 instructions on how to start 12 different kind of campfires. Who knew? No wonder I had so much trouble. 12 different kinds of campfires. So apparently I was missing a whole lot of information. But I just thought that was kind of unique, and I just do that. When I hear of a strategy that works, or I hear something that successful people do, like I'm always looking and see, well, where did that get started? Who came up with that idea? And anybody ever heard the expression, who's got your six? So we all know that means who's got your back, right? That position of vulnerability. So I looked that up too. It turns out that phrase was first used by fighter pilots in World War I. And it was used to reference the fact that they would have the back, or that most critically vulnerable position of the pilot in front of them. And so that's just kind of come to mean to all of us when we say, I've got your six. It means we have somebody that's watching our back, that's looking out for us, that's keeping an eye out for our own well-being. And if you have someone who has your back, then you have someone who is watching out as you are entering into a potentially dangerous area or facing a perilous circumstance that you might not even be aware of. So they're looking out for you in the spaces and the places you can't see, in your blind spot. They're looking out for your places of vulnerability, and they're committed to giving you a heads up and protecting your back. If you have someone who has your six, as you're walking through life, then that's a person who's not afraid to ask you the tough questions. Those are people who will call you out when you're making questionable choices or unwise decisions. They are willing to risk us being upset with them in order to warn us and to keep us from danger. We all need people in our lives who have our six. Every one of us. It's a fact. Anytime you set out to do anything good, anything that's great, anything that's right, it's an absolute fact you will face adversity. You will face obstacles, you will face struggles, you will face hardships. Maybe you're here tonight and you're determined to be the mother or father to your children that you never had. Maybe you're working to stay sober. Maybe your goal, the thing that you want to accomplish, is you want to break the cycle of dysfunctional relationships. Whatever the goal is, whatever change it is whatever it is that we are pursuing, we have to understand. We have to know that we're going to face opposition, and we need to prepare for that. It would be unwise not to. We will have to contend with habits and behaviors, and even sometimes people who function as enemies of our goal, who actually will be in a position to block us getting to the destination we are after. We will face obstacles to our destiny. And as we go after and chase our better way of living, and as we work to make better choices, as we go after our best life possible, I know that many of us here tonight understand the importance of developing a relationship with God. We have admitted we were powerless, that our lives have become unmanageable, and we've surrendered to a power that is far greater than ourselves. We recognize the need to cultivate and nurture a personal relationship with God. We get that. We know that. We're working on that. But for some reason, many of us fail to understand, we fail to comprehend that that alone is not enough. For whatever reason, we fail to see that even though a relationship with God is absolutely critical and it's necessary, it's not enough. If we're going to get where it is we have put in our spirit to get, if we're going to be the person we aspire to be, if we're going to be the person we were created to be, a relationship with God is not enough. And at some point in time, we will have to come to terms with the truth that we are in need of healthy, strong relationships with other people who will have our six. We must come to understand the critical importance of belonging to a community of people who will have our back. And we must come to understand as well that we are meant to watch the backs of others. In the Old Testament, there's a story about a young man named Nehemiah. This young man had a position, he had a job, he had something that he was committed to doing. The Bible tells us that he was a cupbearer to the king of Persia. I'm not sure exactly what that all entails. Sounds kind of cool, working for a king. But Nehemiah, the Bible tells us, as he would serve the king and as he was present, he would have people visit from Jerusalem, from the city where God's people lived. And he would hear stories about how the walls of Jerusalem were in ruins. They had been destroyed. And he would hear about the great disrepair. And he would hear about the vulnerability of God's people because the wall was virtually non-existent. So in Bible days, the way a city protected itself was to build a mighty wall, a fortress that would completely surround it. High, thick, strong walls meant a good defense. It means the people could live and thrive and learn and conduct their business and raise their families without fear of attack, because soldiers would be positioned high on the wall to keep an eye out. So when Nehemiah heard this, it burdened him and began to feel a call to do something about it. Now, I don't know, maybe you're here tonight and you can relate to that. Life's been okay. It's been all right. You've got responsibilities. You've got this. You've got that thing or this thing that you're working on. But something inside you says, you know what, I'm meant for more. There's something greater for me than the place I'm currently at. And Nehemiah did something very brave. He went to the king and he asked for permission to actually lead a campaign to rebuild the wall of Jerusalem. And he was granted that permission. And so he gathered some men and women, got them together, and rolled out the plan for them. And as he did this, and as he assembled his team, they would learn some things about advances and setbacks, about enemies to the plan. They would learn that not everybody would support them. They would learn that not everybody would like what they were up to. And at first, they were just made fun of. So at first, the enemies of God's people just gathered around and just ridiculed them and trash talked them. I mean, the best trash talkers that they were, and they just made fun of them and said, you have no clue what you're doing. What in the world makes you think you could possibly accomplish this goal? What are you thinking? This will never work. You'll never finish this. You're wasting your time. Look how ridiculous this is. Who are you? How are you qualified? The Bible says that one of the taunts they would throw out is that the work was so shabby and so poor that if a fox were to run up the wall they were building, that the wall would crumble. So these people, as they're working on this lofty goal, a goal that seemed much larger than themselves, had people that were not for them succeeding. They had people that were very vocal in pointing out the fact that they weren't necessarily qualified to do the work, and they had to learn to contend with that. They had to learn to shut that out and focus on the task at hand. And so they persevered. Maybe you faced some things like that before, and you know how disheartening it can be to have people who do not believe you have what it takes to do the job you've set about doing. Hopefully, you've also made the choice to persevere in spite of that. One of the most difficult things we could ever come to understand is not everyone is meant to make the journey with us. Not everyone will support what we're doing. And we have to persevere anyway. We have to go on anyway. So as they persevered, the wall began to take shape. Now the enemies of God were beginning to worry a little bit because it looked like these people were actually starting to pull it off. the wall was actually being built. So they switched tactics from ridicule to trying to incite fear. They began to plan secret attacks. You see, the workers were extremely vulnerable as they worked on this wall. As they put all their focus and energy into building that wall back, they were vulnerable. And as they began to hear rumors of attacks, they began to get terrified. They began to worry they would lose their life in the process of doing what it is they were set about to do. They realized that there was a real threat, that the work they were doing could be actually the way they come to their end. So they began to be afraid not just of not completing their goal, but possibly of even being harmed. And Nehemiah, realizing this, organized a sort of system of sixes, if you will. And what he commanded, what he instructed, was that half of the workers, half of the men and women that had been assembled to build this wall, would continue to work to build the wall. The other half would stand and guard their backs as they worked. The ones that stood guard would have spears ready at any moment to protect the life of the person working to build the wall. And they strategically placed other people all around the perimeter with trumpets, so that if there were to be an attack that were launched, they could sound the alarm and everyone could close ranks. And they would trade off. So basically, it was a system of you guard my back while I work, and I'll guard your back while you work. And it worked very, very well. And Nehemiah had something to say to the people as he encouraged them and explained this to them, why they were going to continue on this way and how they were going to complete this and what that was going to look like. And I want you to consider that what it is you are working for right now in your life, that goal that you have, that dream that you're after, I want you to consider that it is meant to impact more than just your life. Nehemiah told his people, remember the Lord who is great and awesome, and fight for your families. What was he saying? He was saying, keep going. There is something ahead of you worth fighting for. And it's going to matter to more people than just you. It's going to matter to the people you love. It's going to matter to your families. Remember God. He is great and he is awesome. But you will have to fight for what it is you are after. You will need to have someone guard your back as you go after this goal. And you will need to guard the backs of others as well. This was a massive success. The wall went up, the Bible says, within 52 days. And the entire city of Jerusalem was able to thrive and prosper and dwell free of fear, knowing they were protected. Because those dreamers who became doers learned the value of having someone have their six. Listen to me. Health, well-being, recovery, progress, success happens in a community of people who have learned to have each other's backs. Success happens to people who know how to anchor in, who know how to surround themselves with people who can help them succeed. And it happens to people who learn how to be there to help other people succeed as well. Many of us have it backwards. We think that to be strong, we have to go it alone. We glorify Lone Ranger type heroes, even in our movies. We all love to see that one guy, the underdog, the one man, defeat all the bad guys, to come out on top, to defy impossible odds, and he somehow summons the courage and he pulls it all together, and we love that kind of thing, don't we? In our culture and in our daily lives, the willingness to ask for help is something we often equate with being weak. We feel compelled to fight through on our own as though we have to prove that we can do it on our own. Many times we're just too afraid to let others see we're afraid, so we don't ask for help. We discount how we can help others because we don't think we have it together enough. We don't think we have anything of value to share. We think one day when, one day if, then I'll help, then I'll give back, then I'll support and encourage others. You know, the truth is that going alone doesn't make you strong. It makes you incredibly vulnerable. And not only that, no matter who you are or where you're at in life, you have something of value to give, even if it's only to share what hasn't worked for you. You have something that someone else needs to hear. You have something to impart that will have value and meaning. There is someone out there who needs you to have their six. You were never meant to go alone. You were never meant to walk this journey alone. We all need the gift of someone else's perspective, of someone else's wisdom, even to know their disappointments, their heartaches, their mistakes, their challenges. We all have areas where we need to grow. We all have areas that we need to expand and stretch. We have habits we need to change. We all have stuff. My stuff might not look like your stuff, and it might not look like your stuff, but it's all stuff. We all feel like we're not going to make it at times. We all face seasons where we feel like, man, there's just no way. We are not cut out. We're not capable. We all feel like we're the only ones, but feelings are not facts. We all have issues. We all have things that we need help to resolve. We all have battles to fight. The truth is, we all need someone to love and accept us where we are, to care enough to invest in us. We all need someone to never, ever let us forget we're capable of more. We all need someone to call us on our excuses, to ask the tough questions, to hold us accountable. We all need someone to remind us when we've fallen that it's not the falling down that matters, but the getting back up. If you don't remember anything else from tonight, I want you to remember this. Isolation is the enemy of health. When you go it alone, when you've got no one to point out your wrong thinking, when you've got no one to help you sort through the gray areas, when you have no one to call you out on your victim mentality, when you have no one there to encourage you, when you have no one there to remind you of the times you have been successful, you will be in a quick downward spiral into a very unhealthy place. We must have people who have our six. And we must commit to being the kind of person who watches the backs of others as well. The simple and yet powerful truth is we are always stronger together. We must understand that when we insist on going out alone, when we insist on doing the Lone Ranger thing, when we refuse to seek help, and when we isolate and we are not available to help others, we actually miss out on our divine calling. Because we were never intended to walk our path alone. We are actually hardwired for connection. We were created to be in relationship with other people. We are intended to both receive and give help. It's a two-way street. Our stories matter. And we were meant to be a vital part of other stories as well. That's why we have Freedom Night. That's why we do this every Friday. That's why we all come together. All of us from different backgrounds, all of us have different specifics, yet we have a common purpose, a common goal. That's why we're so committed to being a community of second chances, of unconditional love and acceptance. That's why we're so committed to being a community of grace. That's why we're determined to share our stories, to lift each other up, to remind each other there are better days ahead. That's what Freedom Night is about. Success happens in community. Health happens in community. Good habits, great choices, better lives happen in community. Ecclesiastes tells us that two are better than one. If either of them falls down, the verse says, one can help the other up. But pity anyone who walks alone. There's a story in the New Testament, and I love this story so much. One of my favorite stories. There's a man who is not well. There's a man who is actually paralyzed. He's unable to walk. And he's got a good group of friends. He's got a group of friends that have his back. He's got a group of friends that know he wants to be healthy, and they know he wants to be well. And they hear that Jesus is coming to their town. And Jesus has a reputation for healing people everywhere that he goes. And these friends, they get together and they say, man, we're going to get you to Jesus. We are going to get you to a place where you can get better. And as they draw close to the house where Jesus is, as they enter into that general area, they find that the crowds are just so thick that there's no way they can even get close to being able to even get to the house that Jesus is in. So being the kind of friends that have their paralyzed friends back, they don't give up. They don't call it quits. They don't say, oh, well, maybe next town, maybe the next time, maybe later. They don't let adversity stop them. They don't let obstacles stop them. And so they hatch a plan to literally carry their friend on a stretcher up the stairs to the roof of this house. And I can just imagine what a chore that would have been, just even getting him up the steps. And in Bible days, the roofs were flat, made of clay, stone, and sticks. So this was not an easy thing to do. And I can only imagine as the people are gathered inside around Jesus and the roof begins to crumble a little bit, and pieces of clay are coming down the ceiling. And people begin to wonder, what in the world is going on here? And then there's this hole that's cut. And a man on a stretcher who was lowered down in front of Jesus. The Bible tells us that Jesus was so impressed with the faith of this man's friends that he first forgave the man of his sins. Second, he healed him so he was able to get up and walk. It's important to realize. It's important to consider and understand the faith and the actions of the paralyzed man's friends resulted first in spiritual healing, second in physical healing. You see, Jesus was present, but not accessible. And healing was possible, but not accessible, until the man's friends who had his sick decided to go to extremes, to think outside the box, to not be deterred by obstacles and adversity. They refused to buy into that they weren't capable, that there was no way. They knew they needed to get their friend to Jesus where he could get well, where he could be healed. They had his sick, and they would not give up. I don't know what you're fighting for tonight, but I know if it's anything of value, if it's anything of importance at all, you will face adversity. You will face obstacles. You will face times where you feel like there is no way this is possible for you. Maybe you're fighting tonight to go 2 hours without a drink. Maybe you're fighting to get to know the person you are when you're clean. Maybe it's your goal to be the first person in your family to own their own business. Maybe you want to sing or write, or maybe you've got an incredible artistic talent and you dream of being able to share that with the world. Maybe you want to travel and experience other cultures, and no one in your family has ever left Kentucky. Maybe you're fighting to get your health back. Maybe you're fighting to get your children back. You are in the fight of your life, but you do not have to fight alone. Open up. Dare to ask for help. Dare to offer help. And watch the miracle of community happen. Just like in the story of the man whose friends lowered him down through the roof. The faith of a few people gathered together for one purpose, committed to having each other's backs, will result in healing.